Good afternoon. On the behalf of 4,800 members of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local Union 357 is an honor to host the House of Labor. My name is Lamar Jones. I'm a 30-year member of the IBEW, the Assistant Business Manager of this fine local. The majority of the Local 357 works in the construction industry for commercial and industrial contractors. We are integral to the operations of the City of Las Vegas and Southern Nevada. Right now, we have 600 members working on the Fountain Blue, a massive casino with almost 4,000 hotel rooms. We also have the MSG Sphere with the world's largest dome, which will seat more than 18,000 for what we call a fully immersive performance and experience. We also are getting ready for the Formula One race in November, which will take place on the iconic Las Vegas Strip. This project generates hundreds of thousands of hours for the IBEW members. But drive out past the lights, into the desert, and another story about the future of renewable power. Industrial solar generations and battery backup that harness and deploy power. Even in the dark, Local Union 357 has over 400 members working on the Gemini Solar Project. Gemini will be the largest solar facility in the world and one of the biggest renewable energy projects of its kind globally. It also includes battery storage to ensure the power constantly is available. Nevada will lead the country last year in the solar jobs. Thanks to the dedications of brothers and sisters of this local union, the IBEW introduced solar into our training more than 20 years ago. In the past 10 years alone, we have installed 2 gigawatts of solar power. This is enough to power up 1.75 million houses a year. It's not good luck or abundant sunshine. This is putting IBEW members to work these days. It is the game-changing investment of the Biden administration. Like the Inflation Reduction Act, the biggest climate energy law that has passed in U.S. history. The Inflation Reduction Act ensures long labor standards on the projects that it funds. Its prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements and tax credits. It also puts laws, stiff penalties for violators that cheat their workforce. We have been training and certifying members on battery storage and photovoltaic technologies because it's clear that IRA projects should be installed by our union labor force. Making sure that Local Union 357 members are safe, skilled, and trained is one of my most important jobs. Thanks to this building boom, a high labor standards, and these laws, the future is looking bright for the IBEW Local Union 357. The fall our new investments class will be including as 200 new apprentices, nearly quadrupling the 2022 freshman year. IBEW is always reaching out to extend our family's sustaining union membership advantages, like fair wages, job safety, health and security, retirement benefits. They are the gold standards in the industry. Our apprenticeship will be accepting applications for August 21st through September 1st. The anticipation even more major needed to help to build these projects. These union opportunities allow not just individuals, but families, communities, and generations to prosper and rebuild the middle class. From the bottom up to the middle out, as President Biden says. I'm certain our special guest will have more to say about that. She has spent her career focused on unemployment and dignity of the workers. I am honored today to introduce the U.S. Secretary Janet Yellen. Dr. Yellen is the first person in American history to have held White House Council of Economics Advisors, the Federal Reserve, and the Treasury Department. When she was nominated by President Biden in 2020, he said Secretary Yellen understands what it means for people to their communities when they have good and decent jobs. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, I am thrilled to welcome to the House of Labor, Treasury Secretary of the United States, Dr. Janet Yellen.
Thank you. It's really great to be here in Vegas, Las Vegas, with all of you. And I want to especially thank Lamar for your introduction and for your team's hospitality. And I'm grateful to everyone from the IBEW and building trade unions for your very warm welcome. Now, many of you may not know that I began my career as a labor economist. I studied the labor market, how workers and companies interact when it works and when it doesn't. Since then, much of my life has been dedicated to creating an economy that lifts workers and families up rather than weighing them down. If I've learned one lesson from my time in economics, it's this: American workers are central to our nation's economic progress. And what you're doing here in Vegas and across the country demonstrates every day how skilled workers are literally building our new economic future. I couldn't be more pleased to join you. Just shy of a year ago, I delivered a major economic speech in Michigan that laid out the case for our administration's economic plan. At the time, we'd just witnessed an historic economic recovery from the depths of the pandemic downturn. An unprecedented pace of job creation had brought the U.S. labor market back in record time. Yet we were still in the early stages of executing President Biden's long-term economic agenda. We had just completed the enactment of our trifecta of historic investments: the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the CHIPS and Science Act, and the Inflation Reduction Act. During that speech, I also explained the principles that guided our economic agenda. I outlined a framework called modern supply-side economics, an economic philosophy that animates much of Bidenomics. It focuses on how government can help spur long-term growth through investments on the supply side, such as in our workforce and its productivity. Unlike traditional supply-side economics, this approach cares not only about growth, but also about creating a fairer and more sustainable economy. President Biden has advanced a significant core of the modern supply-side agenda through the passage of these 3 generational laws. Today, I want to discuss what we've accomplished since last summer. I'll first speak about the state of our economy. Then I'll turn to the clean energy provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act. It's an historic law that Treasury plays the chief role in implementing. And this week, we mark 1 year since the President signed the IRA into law. I want to speak about the progress we've made, not only in driving the climate benefits of the law during a summer when Americans are feeling the harsh realities of climate change. I'd also like to discuss the economic benefits that we're already beginning to see across the country for American workers and families. Powered by the IRA, the President's agenda has helped drive a massive boom that is touching every corner of the country. Since January 2021, companies have committed over $500 billion in manufacturing and clean energy investments. The explosion in U.S. factory construction is a uniquely American story. It's one we do not see replicated in other peer countries. But let me start by speaking about the state of the economy. Over the past year, our task has been to transition the economy from rapid recovery to stable growth. Our path so far shows we're on the right track, even as we remain vigilant about potential challenges and uncertainties. Take our labor market. Americans are back to work. Our historically rapid jobs recovery has been a source of strength as we made our way back from the pandemic recession. This recovery was driven in large part by the decisive economic measures that President Biden took to provide assistance to households, businesses, and state and local governments. Since President Biden entered office, over 13 million jobs have been created. Last month, our unemployment rate was at a near record low of 3.5%, and that's less than a quarter of the unemployment rate recorded in April 2020. Importantly, we've also seen a significant recovery in the share of Americans participating in our workforce. This rebound in labor supply has brought the jobs market into better balance. The overall labor force participation rate is now back in line with pre-pandemic trends. The share of prime-age Americans currently employed, that's those between the ages of 25 and 54, that share has reached its highest level in over 20 years. And in fact, the share of prime-age female workers currently employed is the highest it has ever been. Notably, the labor market recovery has been strong for workers across a broad set of communities. The rates of unemployment for Black and Hispanic Americans are at among their lowest on record. Now, these are not abstract statistics. These are real Americans back at work, able to put food on the table, able to support their families, able to save for retirement. As President Biden says, a job is about a lot more than a paycheck. It's about dignity. It's about respect. It's about your place in the community. And the people in this room know that very well. The continued strength of our labor market is particularly impressive given our fight against inflation. Last July, I gave a speech about the remarkable resilience of the American economy and our workers in the face of global challenges. There were many who questioned whether that could last, but that's precisely what we've seen over the past year, even as we remain attuned to the significant risks ahead. Annual headline inflation is now nearly 6 percentage points below its June 2022 peak. Today, overall inflation and the unemployment rate both sit below 4%, and our economy continues to expand. And workers are better off than they were last year. Real average hourly earnings have grown over the past year. That means wage gains are outpacing inflation. In fact, in 9 out of 14 major sectors, real wages are growing faster than they were in the decade before the pandemic. And that has had a sizable impact on reducing inequality. One paper estimates that wage gains for lower income workers in recent years have reversed nearly a quarter of the wage inequality that had accumulated over the past 40 years. The administration remains committed to taking actions to lower prices for Americans where we can. And we continue to monitor developments, particularly those abroad, that may affect prices and growth. But I still believe there is a path to continue reducing inflation while maintaining a healthy labor market. While there are risks, the evidence we have seen so far suggests we are on such a path. And Americans are reflecting this optimism. Consumer sentiment is at its highest level in almost 2 years. I expect the important gains that we've made over the past 2.5 years to serve as a source of resilience in the weeks and months to come, even if we see further cooling in our economy. As we continue to navigate through short-term challenges, the President has been clear we cannot just make quick fixes. Over the past few decades, we've seen growing pressures on the economy, and many workers and families have felt them personally. They include slowing productivity growth, rising economic inequality, concerns about our energy and national security, and a worsening climate crisis that, if unmitigated, presents an existential threat to us all. Our administration is taking decisive actions against these persistent challenges by investing in America. We've mobilized public and private investments in 3 strategic sectors as part of our modern supply-side agenda. We passed the bipartisan infrastructure law, which is a generational investment in our physical and digital infrastructure. This law is already delivering tens of thousands of new projects across the country that are increasing our productivity and growth potential. They're also strengthening our competitiveness and supply chain resilience. We also enacted the CHIPS and Science Act. That's a major investment that is boosting semiconductor manufacturing and incentivizing investments in cutting-edge R&D. A strong semiconductor industrial base at home will help bolster our nation's resilience to global shocks. Finally, we're implementing the Inflation Reduction Act, and that is our nation's boldest ever climate action. And it's beginning to spark an economic renaissance in communities that had been left behind. I'd like to focus specifically on the Inflation Reduction Act as we mark its 1-year anniversary. Last year, I identified 3 goals for this law: tackling climate change, expanding economic opportunity, and strengthening our economic resilience and energy security. So let me speak about how we've made progress against each of these goals. First, tackling climate change. Over the past month, we have again seen incontrovertible evidence that climate change is here. We have also seen how it has compounded the effects of unusual weather patterns like El Nino. Extreme heat has scorched communities across the United States. There have been record-breaking temperatures from Phoenix to Miami. And here in Las Vegas, you've seen similarly waves of crippling extreme heat. In fact, scientists estimate that July was the hottest month in the Earth's modern history. Beyond the heat, a large part of the East Coast and Midwest have been repeatedly shrouded in smoke from wildfires in Canada. Floods have devastated Vermont and other parts of the East Coast, while the Midwest and other regions continue to battle a severe drought. These climate events have real economic impacts on Americans, even if they are spared from the physical impacts. As an example, home insurers are hiking rates or pulling back entirely from highly vulnerable areas in states like California and Florida. These developments are having a significant economic impact on home ownership, which has long been the cornerstone of the American dream and a primary driver of household wealth. President Biden has identified this decade as the decisive decade to combat climate change. The United States is committed to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by at least half from 2005 levels by 2030. And we've committed to a net zero economy by 2050. Tackling climate change requires global action, but the United States must do our part, and a clear signal from the world's largest economy can mobilize actions by other nations. While more is needed, scientific studies conclude that the IRA and other administration actions are moving us well toward achieving our commitments under the Paris Agreement. Our climate strategy is based on a simple premise. Targeted public investments can help mobilize private capital toward compelling public policy objectives. This is an old strategy, one we've successfully utilized in the past, like in the development of new technologies like the internet. The IRA invests in both demand and supply side incentives to build the clean energy economy. On the supply side, the IRA expands and extends the existing foundation of tax incentives. These incentives provide long-term certainty for investors in pursuing clean energy projects. With the IRA, investors have greater confidence to scale up deployment of established technologies like solar energy. The IRA also helps develop nascent technologies like clean hydrogen and sustainable aviation fuel. These are essential to reducing emissions from hard-to-abate sectors. Expansions on the supply side are also matched by IRA tax credits and rebates to drive up demand for consumer goods like electric vehicles, heat pumps, and energy-efficient appliances. Together, these incentives spur greater innovation and competition in the clean energy industry. And they drive down the cost curves of these technologies, and lower costs mean greater adoption. And that will help not only the United States mitigate our greenhouse gas emissions, it will help the rest of the world as well. Thanks to the IRA, one study estimates that for every ton of carbon dioxide reduced within our country, 2 to 3 tons of reductions will be achieved outside the United States. Second, as we reap the IRA's climate benefits, we're also expanding economic opportunity to communities across America. The climate transition is one of the biggest economic transitions of our lifetime. Today, over $1 trillion in new capital each year is being invested in clean energy around the globe. But for far too long, economic opportunity in the United States has been concentrated on the coasts, and that must change. We must not only create clean energy jobs in the aggregate, but the employment and other benefits of this transition must accrue broadly across all communities. So a core goal of the IRA is to revitalize communities that have suffered industrial decline or been left behind. We're putting American workers and American jobs at the center of our clean energy transition, making sure Americans in every part of our country benefit from the rising global demand for low-carbon products. Well, the early results are in. Through my travels, I've seen how the clean energy industry is expanding across the country. I visited solar companies in North Carolina and Louisiana. I've toured an EV battery plant in Tennessee, and I see the difference that the IRA is making here in Nevada as well. In the Midwest and the South, there are now so many shovels in the ground for new EV battery factories that many are dubbing these regions the new battery belt. Treasury's analysis indicates that investments in clean energy, EVs, and batteries since the president took office have been concentrated in counties that need them the most. That is, those that had lagged the country in earnings, college graduation rates, and child poverty rates. Now, this progress has not occurred by happenstance. The Inflation Reduction Act provides placed incentives that bolster the business case to invest in certain communities. There's a bonus incentive for companies to invest in solar and wind projects in low-income communities, complementing Treasury's other work to bolster capital access in these places. It's also important that cities and towns that have served as the backbone of our nation's traditional energy production are not left behind. The IRA provides a bonus for companies that invest in areas with closed coal mines or coal-fired power plants, and other communities that have relied on jobs in fossil fuel industries. And this is a major pillar in our administration's broader effort to renew the economic potential of our nation's energy communities. Importantly, the workers that are driving the clean energy transition, like those in this room, must benefit from it. So the law requires companies to adhere to strong wage standards and apprenticeship requirements to claim the full value of many of the incentives. Earlier this summer, Treasury also released proposed guidance that would make it easier for these tax credits to reach a broad range of institutions. We're implementing innovative tools that will enable states, cities, towns, and tax-exempt organizations like schools and hospitals to directly access these credits. And these measures serve as a force multiplier for the IRA, and they allow clean energy projects to be built more quickly, affordably, and by more entities. As a result of this provision, we expect the massive benefits of the IRA to be felt more rapidly and more broadly. Investing in underserved communities is not just an important moral imperative. It's also smart economics. One study indicates that boosting employment in distressed regions results in at least 60% greater economic benefits than those in booming ones. Put simply, it gives us a bigger bang for our buck. And all of us benefit when we bring people back into the workforce and provide them and others with access to good-paying, high-quality jobs in the industries of the future. The third goal we laid out for the IRA is bolstering resilience and energy security. The bipartisan infrastructure law provides significant investment to adapt to climate change. That includes protecting our infrastructure against droughts, floods, and extreme heat. But beyond climate adaptation, we must also mitigate our vulnerabilities to shocks emanating from our reliance on fossil fuels. Over the past couple of years, we've seen how huge swings in the price of oil can put tremendous pressure on the pocketbooks of American families. We've also witnessed Russia weaponize its energy exports against our European allies and partners. Well, energy is the lifeblood of our economy. A clean energy transition will enable us to depend more on the wind and the sun and less on fossil fuels and the whims of those who control those resources. And that will make a difference to ordinary Americans who will have greater stability and predictability in their energy costs. This means greater certainty in their budgets and less time looking at the price boards outside of gas stations. But we must do more. As we move away from fossil fuels, we remain concerned about the risks of overconcentration in clean energy supply chains. Today, the production of critical clean energy inputs, from batteries to solar panels to critical minerals, that's concentrated in a handful of countries. It's important that we build resilient and diversified critical global supply chains that can reduce choke points, mitigate disruptions, and protect our economic security. And that starts by investing here at home. The IRA is helping reshore some of the production that's critical to our clean energy economy. Looking beyond our shores, we're also working hard to accelerate the clean energy transition in other countries. Accelerating these transitions can mean greater demand for U.S. clean energy technologies produced by American workers. It can also bolster global clean energy supply chains. As we look forward to the fall and beyond, it's remarkable to consider how far we've come. Our administration is laser focused on continuing to provide clarity on the law so that its benefits can continue to be felt as soon as possible by American workers and families. We're also providing important guardrails so taxpayer resources are effectively spent. The IRS plays a major role in administering the IRA's clean energy incentives, and we believe that the IRS Modernization Initiative is essential to the law's successful implementation. So we will continue our efforts to build a tax administration system that's fit for the 21st century. Well, it's 25 years ago, I gave my first major speech warning about the economic dangers of climate change. And since that time, we have seen climate impacts intensifying. But while the world had long recognized the need for decisive action, the federal government had been missing in action, but no longer. Over the past year, we have seen the early results of bold federal action through the IRA and the administration's broader climate agenda. Importantly, we've seen how climate action advances our nation's economic priorities. The IRA is driving economic growth, expanding economic opportunity, and bolstering our resilience. This is good for the American workers in this room and so many others across the United States. Personally, I'm excited about the future we're building together, and I hope you are too. Thank you for having me here today.